Hi. Chapter 11. Mrs. Beggins yanked them closer, shaking them with firm, pudgy hands. You blighters didn't come back last night. What have you been up to? Arthur looked at the tower clock. It was 1/4 to the chimes of 8. Mr. Beggins, Mrs. Beggins shrieked. Mr. Beggins came running out of Beggins Hall. Arthur knew they didn't stand much chance of escaping if Mr. Beggins reached them too. He exchanged a quick look with Maudie. Each of them stamped hard on the nearest foot to them. Mrs. Beggins cried out in pain and let go. The twins pelted along the street and turned into Old Ropey. The Begginses' footsteps thundered behind them as they took a turn into the tight alleyway of Skanky Row. Mr. and Mrs. Beggins' shouts weren't far behind. There they are! Get him, Mr. Beggins! With a great screech, Parentha swooped into the alley ahead of them, urging them forward. They ran onwards, knowing if they gave anything less than 100%, it would all be over. Their lungs burned, yet on they darted through the alleys and streets as the minutes passed too quickly towards Archangel Street, their legs muscles on fire. Not knowing it was possible to run any faster, they sped through the last few streets as the o'clock chimes rang across Lonstown. 1, 2, 3. Come on, Arthur called. 4, 5, 6, 7. They rounded the corner to Archangel Street as the 8th and last chime sounded. A crowd gathered before number 4. The ground rumbled. Everyone gasped. The house was doing something utterly extraordinary. The front seemed to be folding inwards, revealing great pistons and cogs whirring and crunching. Then the edges of the house joined at the front. The door had entirely disappeared inside. Shutters opened beside the windows, and small propellers sprouted from the house, unfolding and turning. With the scrap of metal and a sound like a great cog clunking and grinding, the roof lifted backwards, folding into a huge concertina. As it peeled back, Arthur could see Harriet Culpepper close to the front above, standing by a great wheel. Her short hair waved in the wind. She wore flying goggles, and a white scarf billowed beside her. Welby was close by, pointing and ordering the others who had gathered on the roof. Felicity Wickety was there, her cheeks red and a giant spoon in her hand, waving at the crowds below. The cannon sounded at the Geographical Society, significantly starting the challenge. Wait! Arthur called desperately, but his voice was drowned by the further rumble of engines from deep inside the house. As the previous roof disappeared over the back, a great cloak of white fabric expanded above into an enormous balloon. Ropes were being pulled and tied and extended and heaved. Arthur watched, his mouth wide, utterly amazed at what he was seeing, but his heart pumped with panic. There was a great tearing sound, and the crowd took several steps back as the house lifted and ripped clean away from the ground. Then came a shout which made his blood turn icy. There they are! Stop them! Arthur looked over his shoulder to see Mrs. Beggins pointing, doubled up. Out of breath, she had collapsed to her knees, but Mr. Beggins was heading straight towards them. Arthur and Maudie pushed on into the crowd. The commotion hadn't gone unnoticed above. Felicity leant over the side, shaking her arms. Arthur? Maudie? Bless my soul, it's you! Mr. Beggins grabbed Arthur's left arm and twisted it behind his back. Now where do you think you're escaping to, boy? Maudie lunged, but he was too quick and grabbed her around the neck. Let go of her! Arthur shouted. Then Parentha dived from the sky, claws bared for Mr. Beggins. She grabbed his hair. He let out a yelp, but managed to hold on tight to Arthur and Maudie, who was still panting from the run. Perintha flew upwards again. The house rose higher as the balloons above grew even bigger. Clunks and motors sounded as more sections of the house curved and changed, slotting into place. Number 4 Archangel Street was unlike any other house because the rickety patchwork building had hidden a great secret. It was also the most extraordinary flagship. Finally, a small section of wood above creaked and revolved. It revealed a shining bronze plate which read, "The Aurora." As the ship rose, Arthur's stomach sank further to his feet. Mr. Beggins's hot breath was in his ear. His left arm pulled painfully against his back. Above, Felicity waved her chubby arms, and Harriet Culpepper was now beside her, frowning, while Felicity pointed furiously at Arthur and Maudie. Harriet shook her head and said something to Felicity, then turned and disappeared. Arthur's heart stopped. It was too late. They'd missed their chance with Harriet. "You didn't think you were going with them, did you? You're a nobody. Who else in Longtown would take in a good-for-nothing broken boy like you? I paid good sovereigns." Mr. Beggins sneered into his ear. "Sovereigns that we've earned back many times over," Maudie shouted. Then a flash of silver came from above. The people standing either side of Arthur stepped aside, but Mr. Beggins was too busy trying to keep hold of the Brightstorms to notice. Felicity's great spoon spun through the air and hit him square on the forehead. His grip lost power, and he fell to the ground with a great thud. "You've got to be the foulest, kid-crunching, spindly worm I've ever set eyes on, picking on innocent children." Felicity blew a great raspberry. Maudie gasped for breath and rubbed her neck. "Are you all right?" Arthur said. She nodded. "Of course. Are you?" "Never better." Felicity cheered and beckoned them to hurry. The ship hovered a good 2 meters from the ground now and started to rise. Harriet Culpepper appeared once more beside Felicity, but this time she held a rope. Her eyes met Arthur's. "You can do it," she called, then hurled the rope into the air. It fell just short of the ground. Arthur felt every eye in the square on him. "Jump!" Felicity shouted. Maudie jumped first and scurried up the rope to make room. Arthur ran towards the rope as it rose along with the ship. "Come on!" Maudie cried. With an almighty leap, he propelled himself up and grabbed the rope with his left arm. Within seconds, his muscles burnt. He twisted his wrist and wound the rope around. "Don't you dare let go, Artie!" Maudie yelled from above, but there was little he could do, as he couldn't clamp his iron hand on the rope without the other hand moving his iron fingers. He would have to hold on, or it would be all over. Gasps came from the crowd as the ship rose. When he glanced down, Mrs. Beggins was there, jumping for his foot, grabbing it. With every bit of energy he could gather, Arthur kicked out of her grasp and she fell backwards. Arthur slipped down, only just managed to keep hold. A second rope fell down alongside him as the ship ascended at an alarming rate. His heart plummeted to his boots as he rose up and up. "Don't look down!" Felicity shouted. "Hold on!" called an approaching voice, strong and commanding. Harriet Culpepper was climbing down to them on the second rope. "Keep going up, Maudie. I'll help Arthur." Every muscle in Arthur's left hand and arm burned furiously, and the straps of his iron arm dug into his shoulder, pulling at him. Harriet shinned down beside him. "Can you swing your legs and wrap them round my back? We'll go up together." "I can't clamp my iron hand on the rope without using my other hand. I can help pull with one arm if you can take my weight." "Don't worry about all that. The crew will help us. Swing over on 3. Squeeze tight. Let's go. Let go of the ropes and grab my shoulder. 1, 2. You can do it, Artie, Maud shouted. Arthur swung his legs towards Harriet. For a dizzying moment he looked at the crowd and his weight dragged him back. They gasped and screamed, and Perenthin dipped and whirled around him, unable to assist. Then he released the rope and threw his arm around Harriet, trying his best not to strangle her. She glanced over her shoulder at him. Good, now hold on tight. Pull us up, she called. When they were level, Maudie began climbing alongside them. At the top, the crew hauled them over the edge. Arthur and Maudie collapsed to their knees on the deck, gasping for breath. Then they looked at each other and laughed. Whoa, when Mrs. Beggins jumped for you, I know, did you see? And then when you went back and I nearly fell. You held on. You were a natural. And Miss Culpepper, they finished together, looking up as Harriet climbed over the side and jumped to standing, as though she'd simply been for a stroll around the garden. That's one strong arm you've got there, Harriet adjusted her scarf. I take it you both accept my offer of employment. The twins nodded and grinned. Then welcome aboard the Aurora. She put her hands on her hips. But I should be clear that lateness will not be tolerated. Remember that, children. Don't be late. Sorry, Arthur said. Captain Culpepper, Maudie finished. Captain Culpepper was my father. I built my ship with a different philosophy in mind. We were all in this together, and we'll have to take on different roles throughout this journey. So titles have no place here. It's the strength of our ideas that will give us authority, not a title we bear. So please, call me Harriet. Perintha screeched and Arthur extended his arm. She landed gracefully, then butted her head into his cheek. And you're welcome along too, although I'm not sure Queenie will be pleased, Harriet said. A shout of "Watch out!" came from below, followed by a flash of silver and a clang as the spoon clattered across the deck. It's me lucky spoon! Felicity raced to the edge and looked down. Thank you, people of Longtown. The metal spoon nearly came to a stop a few inches from Arthur's iron arm, then changed direction, gliding over and sticking against the metal. He pushed himself up and lifted his arm and the spoon towards Felicity. How in Longtown are you doing that? Felicity asked. It's magnetised, Maudie said proudly. Bless my bunions, you clever thing, she laughed. But I hate to tell you, it means your spoon must not be silver after all, Maudie said. Felicity frowned. But Great Uncle Mungo swore it was forged in silver mines of Berwick Bar, the lion lizard. Maudie shrugged awkwardly. Sorry. Footsteps clunked across the deck. Arthur recognised the highly polished shoes of Welby. You obviously chose Madam Wiggerty for her language and charm, he said to Harriet in his polite uptown tone. Despite her salty language, her chocolate cake is legendary in Longtown, Harriet said. She smiled and shrugged. Welby looked at Arthur and Maudie. When you two have finished having fun, we've got a ship to steer, and after that little delay, our rivals are already much higher than us. Then all crew to the pumps, declared Harriet, her cheeks glowing and her undeniable sparkle in her eye. Oh, and Brady, I hope you're still watching.